It's a new episode, a new week, so let's just go ahead and talk some yarn. And in today's episode, as lots of you already know, there are so many small and tiny projects that can be made with our leftover and scrap yarns. I mean, we can use our leftover yarn for all sorts of things like scrap blankets. Granny squares are a perfect example of that, whether they're the standard size granny square or even a mini granny square. Also, lots of day-to-day use items, like items you want to, you don't mind having a little extra color in, whether it's a little home decor or a little clutch purse. Those are perfect too. And then of course, amigurumis, right? You can always get away with a very small amount of yarn when making your amigurumis. But today, I will give you 5 solid ideas for uses with bits of scrap of yarn that you honestly don't think you can use for anything. And I'm going to let you know that there is, and I do quite frequently for a lot of things, and so I always save my scraps. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, stick around, let's talk. If you just want to see what luscious, lovely yarn I have this week to showcase for my indie yarn pick of the month, either fast forward to the end of this video or watch the video anyways until you do get to the end. At any rate, it doesn't matter. I'm glad to have you. My name is Sig. This is Crochet and Fiber, and you, of course, are always welcomed here. Okay, so we're at the point where I ask you to hit the subscribe bar, notification bell, and like buttons. These things help my channel, and they help you stay connected. And so even if this particular video really isn't your jam, future videos I put out might be right up your alley, and the only way you're going to know that is if you are subscribed to see what I drop pretty regularly. Otherwise, let's just go ahead and get started. So now let's talk scrappy bits of yarn, like just yarn that's anywhere from fluff to maybe several inches long. Typically, anything that falls within that range, lots of people don't think are useful. And I'm going to tell you 5 different ways they actually are useful. So the first way I'm going to tell you that they're useful is with flower motifs. They make great edging if you need to change colors, especially on the little flower motifs. They work great. It just gives you that little bit of yarn that you need, and you just work it into your color change. Color changes, right? Even if you're doing color work, like maybe a Fair Isle piece. And yes, there are Fair Isle crochet techniques. They don't quite look like knitting, but they're still sort of referred to as a Fair Isle approach. And again, those bits are perfect for such things. Also, they're perfect for, and I'll just throw this one into number 1 with the scrappy flowers, is if you're going to use the yarn to embroider a little motif onto something you're doing, you only need a few inches of yarn or thread to do that. And sometimes the color that you need is going to be found in your scrap bag. Now let me show you what my scrap bag looks like. This is kind of my scrap bag, right? I have lots of yarn in here. Sometimes I put in little bits of fabric. I'll talk more about that later. Sometimes I put in little bits of motif right here. I was working on a project and decided something like this doesn't work for me. So I just put it in with my scrappy yarn, and I'll explain more about that in just a few minutes. Number 2, let's talk pom-poms and tassels. Now, pom-poms and tassels, they really don't take a lot of yarn or thread, especially if you're willing to make your pom-pom or tassel colorful. It doesn't take very much length of yarn or thread if your pom-pom is going to be small. If you want to make a larger pom-pom, maybe a little more yarn or thread, and still this is going to be dependent on how you make your pom-poms. There are several different ways to make pom-poms. All of them work perfectly. All of them are good. Some of them might allow you to work your scraps in more easily than others. So this is something you might want to experiment with. But yeah, you use your scrappy yarns in your pom-pom and your tassel making. The length of the yarn doesn't have to be very long, and you get a colorful or patterned looking pom-pom or tassel. Another reason to hold on to your scrappy pieces of yarn. Number 3, believe it or not, quilt ties. You may not quilt, or you may quilt. I have one right here. This is a basic quilt I made for my dog. It just scraps of denim I have collected over the years. Went ahead and cut, whatever, denim pants, denim jackets, denim from the family, whatever. I just cut the appropriate size blocks out of them that I wanted, and I just attached them together. Now, in this case, I had enough denim to make 2 sides of this dog blanket with. And because I didn't want to spend any money on making a blanket for my dog, I decided to use some extra craft felting fabric stuff that I had lying around that I wasn't using. It was just taking up space. So I took the crafting felt that I had and I just tacked it together and used it as the batting for this. But as you can see, I just used my scraps of green from a project that I used with my cheapy green yarn. And basically you're just tying your quilt. So it moves pretty quickly. You don't have to sew a topper onto your quilt. You just simply use the ties, and really, quite frankly, your yarn doesn't have to be more than maybe 4 inches long to make a nice little tie. So that's another great way to just use up the scraps you already have. And this is something that I frequently encourage people to do. Just because, I mean, if you have it, use it. Otherwise, it's going to end up in a landfill. And there's so many things that you can use these scrappy pieces for. And if you quilt or crochet a lot, you're going to, before you know it, build up all sorts of extra yarn. I mean, I guess even if you don't crochet a lot, you're still going to build up a lot of extra yarn scraps. Number 4, I use my scraps for stuffing, like my amigurumis. So those of you who are not selling your amigurumis, maybe this isn't something you feel comfortable doing, but for those of you who are making amigurumis for yourself, amigurumis for your kids, I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how to make your polyfill, which really can get quite expensive, especially if you're making a large amigurumi. How you can make that polyfill go a very, very long ways. Basically, hold on just a moment. Basically, when I'm stuffing, I'm going to have my stuffing on hand, especially if it's a big piece or a larger piece. And because polyfill does get pretty expensive, and I want to make it last as long as I can make it last. And if I already have scrap yarn, then great, right? And what I'll do is I will take my scrap yarn just like this. And this is a big handful, but this is just for the purpose of showing you. Sometimes I do a little smaller handful. It really depends on how big my pieces that I'm stuffing. And then you can see that I've set that right there into my polyfill. And then I'll just wrap the polyfill around it, like so. And so you can see that it fills it in quite nicely. Sometimes I might just take the polyfill and I'll put it into the piece that I want to stuff, and I'll make sure that the stuffing is pushed up to the sides of the crochet piece, and that the center of the crochet piece, or rather the center of the polyfill bowl, for lack of a better description, is where I will then place my scraps into. So that's something to think about. If you're worried about it getting too crazy, all you need to do is just take a little bit of thread and just kind of wrap it around a few times. Here, let me see if I can, I've got some thread over here. I'll show you real fast. Some crochet thread. So if you're worried about it falling apart, just simply take some thread if you have it, some of your scrap thread if you have it, and just wrap your thread around a few times, like you're winding a ball of yarn or something, right? And tie it off, and that holds everything into place just like that. And this is really one of those ways that you can just absolutely save a ton of money on polyfill, especially if you're just using your scrappy yarn, your scrappy yarn bits. I'm going to go ahead and put that right back into my bag. Number 5, felting. Now, this is something that realistically you're going to be able to do pretty much only with wool. And it usually works best with a natural or unprocessed wool. So there's a lot of you out there who crochet or knit with the wool, and you can use those ends for that too. Now, if you have sock yarn, which usually means that it's going to be a blend of some kind of wool plus a synthetic, like a 20% synthetic, you can work bits of that into your felt, but you're not going to be able to use much of it. So maybe I would experiment with that. You could probably use maybe up to a 40% sock yarn blend, I'm going to guess. Maybe you want to go a little less than that. I don't know that I'd go over that amount, but really that's going to be up to you, and it really warrants a little bit of experimentation, I think, because there's so many wonderful things that you can make with your felted fabric, and it's really quite easy. So to felt your scrap wool yarn pieces together can give you some very interesting fabric pieces to make scarves with, or purses with, art pieces with. What we do a little bit of fiber art here too. So this is what we're talking about. Even though you wouldn't be technically crocheting this, you can certainly felt it and get some wonderful pieces as a result of it. And it takes a little bit of time. It's not hard, and the results are very cool. Now, I've given you 5 ideas. The next idea, bonus idea, is going to be, what if you have like scrap pieces, right? So I'm going to basically talk some fiber anyways. I'm going to use the wool pieces and felting your wool pieces and segue that right into regular scrap pieces that we worked up, but we didn't like it for whatever reason. So for example, and this is what I mean, I was working on a sweater and using an inexpensive air blown yarn I wanted to try. I wasn't sure if I would like it or not, but I thought I'd give it a try, and I started making a sweater, and I was almost finished with the sweater. Well, I was really close. I had a little ways to go, but I was really close. And I decided I just did not like the way this yarn worked up. So I figured I would go and I just frog the sweater, because the sweater is made with a pattern. It's not really a granny square, but it's a square, it's a block. So I knew I wasn't going to have long pieces, but I thought I'd go ahead and frog that so that I could have pieces that I might use for something else or for stuffing or whatever. But the yarn wasn't going to let me do that. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is kind of what I was working on. And the yarn, I tried frogging it, and all it does is it just gets knotted and everything gets stuck, and it's a real pain in the butt. So there's a couple of things I can do with this, right? So I'm not going to just throw it out, and this doesn't really hurt my feelings because I wasn't really filling the yarn anyways. I can take this and I can cut this, just cut it up into smaller chunks and then use it like I would use my scrappy yarn bits in stuffing. Because it's still soft, it's still yarn bits, it's still got, I think it has a little bit of wool in it. I'm not really sure. But anyway, so that's what I can do with this. Now, the next thing that I have that can be a lifesaver for you if you're trying to stuff an amigurumi or a large stuffed animal. But maybe you've got some holes in your amigurumi where the stuffing is going to show through, or maybe you just don't like the fact that the stuffing can show through. So this is what I do for that, right? And again, this is kind of a recycle thing. So what I do here is I save my old socks. Like yoga pants, I save my old yoga pants. Some people use nylons. And of course, I wash them. And if it's something I'm making for myself, this is great. If it's something I'm making for somebody I know and they know me, then that's fine. Nobody cares. If you feel weird about doing something like that for a piece that you might sell, then that's up to you. But this is going to help those of you save quite a bit of money and get a much nicer look with your piece. So let me show you. I'll pull out a sock. Okay, so here's, standard sock, right? It's washed and it has a hole in the toe, right? And really, a sock is perfect size for amigurumis. It stretches, right? So if I have a medium size amigurumi and I have the sock, it's so easy to just kind of darn that hole shut, and then I can simply fill this up with either stuffing or fabric or my yarn scraps, and then I can sew it shut. And this makes a great thing that I can put into an amigurumi. And let me see if I've got one that I can show you. This one, for example, right? She's an elephant. She's got a head that's pretty oblong. It's pretty round. There's lots of round parts to it, right? So a sock like this could easily be fashioned to fit right in her head, just right, So you could put the sock in her head, and then you could fill the sock so that it fills out the head just the way you want it. So yoga pants work really well for that. That's a fabric that you can hand stitch, cut up and hand stitch a little bit to fill in the cavity of your amigurumi, and then you just fill that in, and it's going to stretch, and it's not going to affect the shape of your amigurumi, and nobody's going to be able to see the filling on the inside, and it's going to give it a little more strength. And just like with the socks, if you want something that's going to give you maybe more bang for your buck, get yourself some inexpensive tights or nylons, and you can pretty much do the same thing. It's a great, inexpensive way to keep the stuffing from spilling out of your work, especially if you have some holes in it, or especially if you have a motif going on your piece that naturally has holes in it, and you want to keep kind of that visual effect, but you don't want anyone to see the stuffing on the inside. Those are great tricks. I also do that with old t-shirts for, let's say pillows, right? Because buying a pillow is so expensive, like a pillow insert, right? And unless you're going to fashion your pillow to be a pillowcase that you can put over the same insert, like say you change out your pillows every season and you're not particularly concerned about the pillow being exactly the same size, and so then you just make pillow covers that you can just switch out every season and just replace it with the same old insert you have. However, pillow inserts are extremely expensive. So the way I get around that is I save old t-shirts. Now this is old t-shirt from my husband. It's a really thick cotton, and I just I cut it and then resew the fabric to fit the size of the pillow I'm looking to make. And then I fill it exactly as I've explained to you here. I will use several of the tricks. I will use my yarn scraps. I will use my motif scraps that I either decided I didn't like or I didn't need. There are ways that you can fold some of that fabric in there so that you don't even have to cut it up. Rather, the fabric I'm talking about is like the fabric that you make when you crochet a piece. Sort of like here, right? I was playing around with a kind of a granny square idea. well, I mean, it's not my idea, but I was trying to determine if I wanted to use a granny square motif like this on a piece that I was working on. And I used the super cheapest yarn that I had in my stash because I was just messing around. And so I don't need these colors. And this isn't a yarn that I would use on a piece for myself or somebody else, simply because it's not my preference. And so I just use the yarn for mock-ups just to kind of get an idea. So I don't use the yarn that I want to use. I don't waste the yarn that I spent money on, or that I like and don't have a lot of to spare for just messing around. So this, rather than cutting this, I could easily fold this and use this as like an additional insert in the pillow, and I could work my stuffing around it, or anything else. If I had a cylindrical, I could start my stuffing off with, wrapping it around a piece that I've already rolled up. So I'm not spending more money on stuffing. And when you do it and you do it right, I mean, you get nobody knows. The only person who knows that it's stuffed with anything other than stuffing is you, really. Okay, so I'm hoping that some of my ramblings got your creative juices moving along a bit. I'm hoping that you learned something that's going to help you level up your amigurumi, going to help you save some money so that you don't feel like you're drowning in the cost of polyfill. And also maybe some tips and tricks that allow you to try new projects that you were hesitant to try because, let's say the cost of a pillow insert was just going to be, too pricey, right? You just don't have access to that. I know here, if our Joann's is closing down, like everyone else's Joann's is closing down, and their pillow inserts are quite expensive. In fact, I've personally found it much cheaper to go to a Burlington Coat Factory or something along those lines and get a discounted pillow and make my own covering for that pillow. So that's an idea you might consider. But even if I don't have the money for that, even, this is a way I can make my pillow without having to go through all that other stuff, just using what I have on hand. So there are lots of different options, and I hope I gave you some good ideas to explore. Now, let's move on. Move on to the luscious, yummy indie yarn that I have to share with you this month. Yarn time. I love my once a month yarn. Okay, so let's just get going. So the yarn I got this month, I actually know what it is. It was just so beautiful. It really spoke to me. And when I pull it out, I think you'll know why. In fact, she offered kind of a great setup, and I had to buy 3 of them. They're all pretty much the same yarn, but they're like perfect. It's perfect sweater making yarn, right? Perfect colorway for a sweater I have in mind. And so I needed to make sure that I had enough of the basic yarn. Basically, I bought what she had left. And so I needed to make sure that I had enough of that to get a sweater out of. And if I don't, because I don't know that I really have a pattern in mind yet, but if I don't have enough to get the sweater, it really won't take much. It's not going to be a huge leap for me to figure out another yarn or something to fit in there to make the sweater work. Okay, so without too much ado, I know everything comes in these crinkly bags. I have it right here. So if you give me just a moment, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open it, edit out the crinkly parts, and then we'll get going. Okay, so I just went ahead and unwrapped everything because I made a mess. So rather than share that mess with you, I just unwrapped everything and we're going to talk. So to get started, this yarn comes from a woman by the name of Allie in Colorado. And she, or rather her business, is Road Trip Sock Yarn. And of course, this is a postcard she included, and this is what she wrote. Hi, Sigrun. Thank you so much for visiting my Etsy shop. I think it says order. I'm not sure. We're going to go with order. To order these kitty-inspired yarns to your... Oh, okay. Let me try this again. Hi, Sigrun. Thank you so much for visiting my Etsy shop. To add these kitty-inspired yarns to your stitching adventures. Your kindness is greatly appreciated. Happy stitching. Now, what she is referring to is she puts together these yarn combinations, and the minis and the rest of the yarns are either inspired by various the coat coloring of cats or dogs, because these particular colorways and packages, I guess, because you know the packages or the colorways, they typically come combined, are based off of animals that need homes, animals that are in animal shelters. And what she does is she takes a percentage of these particular products and she donates it to her favorite animal shelter. I think maybe it's a no-kill animal shelter. That's my guess. I should have looked into it a little deeper, but I didn't. But that's what she does, and I am totally behind that 100%. I always am impressed. And so just doing that makes me a little more willing to buy something from you, especially if I trust that this is what you're actually doing. So yeah, I mean, this is what it is, but I'm kind of a sucker for these things sometimes anyways. So what happened here was that she had these little packages. See this? $50 for 5 colorways of minis and then 1 colorway of an eye color. So let me take it out of the crinkly package and I'll show you better. Okay, so I purchased 2 of the packages because that's all she had left was the 2 groupings, and they were kind of Advent-y, calendar-y. You know, they were available before last holidays. And I was going to get her dog advent calendar, which was going to have the 24 minis of the different dog coats. But I didn't quite get there in time. She sold the last one before I was able to purchase it. So that's okay. I had cats sitting in my basket too, and fortunately she had some of those left. In fact, she only had 2 of them left, and that wasn't quite enough. But she had a couple of more pieces that were separates that I was able to purchase, and they're of the same colorway. So ultimately, let's just say I got 3 of these sets, and each one of these sets was $50. So for your $50, you got 100 grams of a kitty eye color inspired, and I chose these beautiful light blue color, and she had them in a green and in a like a mustard yellow, like a khaki colored eye. So I chose the blue ones because the blue ones matched with the images of the cats. They all look like they have some kind of Siamese in them, or some sort of Persian, something that has blue eyes, right? A little bit of a blue eye. And so as you can see, each one of these cats, I have a mini with a colorway that's based off of their coat, which is a really nice concept. And so this is what she writes about that. Meow Melange. See, she's right there. She said, meet some of the kitties from the Meow Melange yarn series. Each skein of your yarn is inspired by the colors of these sheltered kittens. These cats are available for adoption at Dumb Friends League in Denver, Colorado. Your purchase of these yarns helps them find their forever homes, plus keeps them happy and healthy while staying at the Dumb Friends League in Denver. Now, when she says dumb friends, for those of you who don't, who think she's calling them stupid, she's not calling them stupid. Dumb just means unable to speak, right? This is an older definition of the word. In fact, it was the original definition of the word, which we don't use it like that too often anymore. So for those of you who might be familiar with the idea of a dumb supper, right? A dumb supper is basically a silent supper, a supper you might have in order to honor an ancestor or to honor the spirits on a Halloween night or on a Day of the Dead kind of night. It's a supper that you would put together and you silently eat while having a place set for your ancestor or the spirit of the deceased person that has also been invited to dine with you. And it's a way of showing respect. So in this case, they're just speaking about friends who are unable to articulate with us. Okay, so a monetary donation is made to the Cats at Denver's Dumb Friends League for every skein of your yarn sold from Herd of Cats. Meow Melange. Let's help the kitties together. So that's sweet. So that'll almost sell me every time. I'm just saying. So let's take a look at these yarns. So we just looked at this beautiful blue yarn, and this yarn is an 85% superwash merino, 15% nylon. For your 100 grams, you're going to get 400 meters. And then for the little fingering weight yarns, so we have these, right? And there's some variations in the other packs, so it's going to be a little crinkly, and I apologize. So you can see how there is some variation, like some of the browns in this one are darker than some of the browns that I got in this set. And then some of the browns in this set sort of sit somewhere in the middle of the first two sets that I showed you. So basically, I got 3 of these, and for 3 of these, I spent $150. So each set was $50, and that wasn't a terrible price. It was actually, pretty good considering what you would pay normally to purchase these things separately. So you didn't save a lot of money, but it's all right, and it's a good cause, right? And so look at those. Aren't those pretty? Can you just see what kind of lovely, soft, maybe tunic kind of sweater this is going to make? Just gorgeous. I'm very excited. And the yarn itself is so soft. Okay, well, I gotta say, another winner again. I get so lucky with the yarns. It's really wonderful, and thank goodness. Oh my goodness. I would be so sad if I wasn't very lucky with yarn. Sometimes I'm not so lucky, but considering how often I risk to just purchase yarn from people that I have no clue as to who they are. I just do it because, well, I like it and I want to share it with you. So with all that said, it is time for me to wrap this episode up for the week. And as usual, I'd like to remind you to keep a cool head, maintain a warm heart, and never take any shit. Not if you can help it. All right now, bye-bye. Until next week.